Ladies and gentlemen, I am Andrew Krabschutz, and this is The Pipeline. And the reason that I'm have you here in front of this camera right now is because I have the distinct privilege of talking to David Bahnsen. And David, you're not Dr. David Bahnsen. Did you ever think about getting a PhD?
I would have to get a bachelor's degree first. So
Fantastic.
Since I've never been in a college classroom, a PhD has never been a big part of my...
Yes.
The only time I've been in a college classroom is teaching. I've never been in one as a student.
That's, well, at least we have that in common. I also have not gotten any college degree, and I have taught in a college classroom. My wife has a PhD, and I paid for it, so I feel like I get at least some credit for that. So for those who don't know David Bahnsen, he has written some books that I have read that are actually really helpful in helping think about the world of work, around economics, around thinking about the haze of this world that we're in today. And in fact, anytime I find myself kind of veering into the cognitive fog that is thinking about politics or economics in the wrong way or the way that the news media would like me to think about it, I go and listen to David's podcast, either Capitol Records or Dividend Cafe. And it kind of is this smelling salt that kind of pulls you out of the craziness. And so I would encourage everybody, if you have not already subscribed to Dividend Cafe and Capitol Records, then you're missing out of something really, really important. But since David talks about economics and politics and capital markets all the time on Fox News and all the other places, I thought I'd kind of take this conversation a different direction. David, I'd like to talk about your business. We have lots of small businesses on Red Balloon and those who are listening. And a lot of them are kind of grappling with, maybe it's that early startup stage of what does it take to start a business, to get going on a business. And so I'd like to talk about the Bahnsen Group a little bit. I'd like to hear kind of what did it take to get the business going? Did you require capital to start? How do you start a business like the Bahnsen Group that is now the juggernaut when it comes to investment advising?
Well, first of all, Andrew, it's wonderful to be with you. I am looking forward to the conversation, and I certainly appreciate your very kind words about me and our Dividend Cafe and Capitol Record product. I think that your question at a high level in terms of what it takes to start a business and then where the Bahnsen Group fits in is a lot of fun. I mean, there's certain lessons that I've learned, and I'm sure you can relate, that you kind of wish you had known before you started. I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all answer on what kind of capital is needed to start a business. I should just give a little caveat. The Bahnsen Group as its own entity, where I was signing the front of the checks.
Yep.
And owned the business, as in I had equity in a company that belonged to me. That began about 10 and a half years ago. But at the time that it started, there was 15 years of track record of a brand called the Bahnsen Group having existed as a wealth management division of Morgan Stanley.
Got it.
And so when I started the Bahnsen Group, it's a little different than a traditional startup because most startups might begin on day one with zero revenue, where we moved $600 million of client assets on day one. And as I spent the 4 or 5 months preparing for the move, I had a pretty high degree of confidence that we would. You don't ever know for sure,
right.
But I'm leaving a job in which I'm making a lot of money. I've built a very successful situation, a top 50 guy at Morgan Stanley out of 16,000 people. But I was basically leaving a comfortably paid job to go run my own business. So there's still risk.
Right.
We're in a service business, so we didn't need money for product or manufacturing or assembly line. You're not going to get any revenue for a little bit, so you kind of have to float cash flow for a little while. And our people cost a certain degree of money, and our office, we have to office in a nice place and so forth. But at the time, it felt like a large amount of expenses. We now have 85 people in 10 offices. At the time, I had 8 people in one office, and I really miss that overhead. But at the time, it was it felt like a big deal. But yeah, we didn't need a ton of capital. I was able to kind of float that to get things going, and really it was just the risk of moving from a very large brand name Morgan Stanley, all of the infrastructure and comforts that go with that, and then being out on our own. So I think there's certain things we had better than a typical startup, and then other things that were still a big risk. It's obviously not a risk a lot of people would take, because you already have a good gig as a W-2 senior person at a big firm.
Right.
You're kind of fixing something that isn't broken, but I felt something was broken, and so we had to go do this.
Okay, yeah, and I was going to ask, like, why did you do it? You kind of need a why to take on the level of risk and everything else. So why not just stick with the W-2?
Yeah, it's funny you say about, because you deal with this a lot with small businesses. You've seen for years in your background with labor, data analytics, and now with what you're doing Red Balloon. The amount of businesses out there, Andrew, that don't know the answer to the question why they're doing it. They can't answer it themselves. It's staggering.
Yeah.
And I think it is far more of a factor in business failure than something wrong with execution or operations or strategy. I think often it's really as basic as first things that they don't know why they're doing it. For us, I believed that we had become a really good business as a part of Morgan Stanley, and that we might have the potential to become a great business, but we did not have the ability to become an extraordinary business. And because I am a Christian, I wanted to be extraordinary.
Right.
And that's it. It was a theological commitment to excellence, that to hire and fire who I wanted, to go into the avenues of wealth services that I wanted without the same compliance and legal limitations, none of which I'm critical of Morgan Stanley for having. I would not allow 16,000 advisors to do the things that I do, because you have to manage to a lower common denominator in a larger organization. But we had entrepreneurial aspirations that needed to be independently fulfilled, and that's why we did it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So would you, now that you've started the business, obviously had a ton of success, 10 years in, would you ever sell the business? Or what's the long-term plan? Are you going to hand this to your kids? Are you going to die in that seat you're currently sitting in? What's your plan?
I just want my kids to remember to bring their lunch to school and to do, running
For sure.
running with what is, many, many billions of dollars. They have not shown me the competence to do so yet. So
Right.
we have a pretty strong anti-nepotism thing going on, but we'll see. I have wonderful kids, and all of them, their intelligence and their character make me think one day they could earn a seat at the company. We already have an answer to your question, because the answer is yes and no. I will not sell it, but I don't need to, because we essentially did an internal succession plan a number of years ago that fully arranged for all of our long-term capital monetization, created a ton of value, and yet didn't have to sell any ownership, any control of the business. And so it's not a legal and financial structure that would be available to most businesses, but because it's a service business with a lot of recurring cash flow, we essentially had a capital partner that was willing to buy an interest in top line cash flow due to net present value calculation, and funded with private equity money, but absolutely no control, not even any equity ownership, no management, no board. That's really all I care about, is control.
Yep.
And then the ability to have the succession go the way I want. At the time that I put that deal together, I was still in my mid-40s. I'm 50 now, getting ready to turn 51. And I want to do this till I die, but I don't ever want the business to be run by somebody other than ourselves. And ourselves doesn't necessarily mean Bahnsen's, but it means Bahnsen Group people. And so now we've kind of taken control of our own fate, and we're not in need of additional capital to affect that. So we sort of pre-funded future succession arrangements, codified it all, and kept control. So I'm very proud of that deal we did.
Yeah, that's a great deal, and I think, and it's interesting that sounds like something that couldn't be necessarily accomplished for all businesses, but something that maybe is something something worth thinking about. There's a lot of baby boomers who have businesses today. They're successful. They don't know what to do with it. They have kids that either don't like them, don't like capitalism, whatever it is, and don't know exactly how to take the next step.
Or they might have different callings.
Right,
kid,
or might just have a different calling. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's talk about company culture a little bit. I want to talk about one of your favorite topics, work-life balance, which has been a bludgeoning tool that's been used on many a small business. How do you, we've kind of lost this meaning of work, and obviously you've written books on this topic. How do you build a culture within the Bahnsen Group of hard work, of not, slacking off, but also not destroying families in the meantime? I've seen both sides of the fence. Growing up in the Bay Area, I saw many a private equity or business person completely destroy their family in the pursuit of capital and making lots of money. And I've also seen lots of dads who sit on the couch and just drink beer and watch sports at night and don't have that ambition that they're going to hand on to their kids or and build a culture within their business. So how do you build a culture of hard work without wrecking families or falling in either of those ditches?
Well, first, let's look at those two extremes that you painted and point out something about the second one. You said that are drinking beer and watching sports at night. And that would be like the ideal for a lot of families these days, just to get them to only do that at nighttime. Because if there weren't 3.1 million male adults, able-bodied male adults doing that in the daytime, we'd have a very different society. So there is a sense in which that other extreme is the predominant one. And what you describe about somebody that might destroy their family with excessive level of focus at work in Silicon Valley or Wall Street or some place of real type A, that it happens, but it is clearly the minority extreme, not the one that I think is more predominant. But the main difference is that somebody laying around on the couch in the daytime is not committing a sin of omission by not being at work. They're committing a sin of commission, because it is sinful to be laying on the couch in the middle of the day, as the Proverbs tell us, saying you think a lion's going to come, and so you're not going to get up and go to work.
Can't even get your hand out of the bowl up to your mouth, kind of thing. Yes.
Really, Proverbs mocking that kind of mentality.
Right.
However, I would argue that the sin that you're actually highlighting of somebody who's working all the time, ignoring their family, is not the sin of working all the time. It's the sin of ignoring their family.
That's right. You're right.
And so there's a category difference that's very important. It is absolutely sinful to ignore your family. It is sinful to ignore your church, your community, your neighbors. We have various spheres that God's entrusted to us that we have moral responsibility in, and those are significant moral responsibilities. But the sin is not ever in actively and dynamically working in one of them. It is in not working in the others.
Right.
And to the extent one could say, well, sin is often a matter of the heart, and there is an idolatry at play where even though you're saying it's okay that person was working hard, they made the work, the status, the money, the manna an idol. Well, okay, that is a sin because all idolatry is a sin. And in fact, all sin is essentially an idolatry. It's
a form of idolatry, yes.
Putting things before God.
Yep.
Right. The first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. That includes our work. That includes our money. That includes our family. Now, only one of these things we have decided to go after as a secular society and as a church.
Yes.
The one idol we're really worried about is people working too hard. What we ought to be doing is telling people, take that hard work spirit you have, that ambition, that drive, and reorder it in the fruits of the Spirit. Reorder it in a sanctified life. Reorder it in a healthy manner that allows you to be a present father, a present husband, a dynamic and meaningful part of your church and community, whatever these elements of civil society you're in, all the while maintaining that ambition. That is, I think, the fully biblical message.
Yes.
But it is, I use this analogy a lot. If somebody had a friend who was alcoholic or a drug addict, and then they say, I want to get my life right. What I need to do, you would say you need to get rid of this demon of alcohol, get rid of this demon of drugs. You need to put that behavior behind you and move on to get your life right. But if we had someone who said, hey, I want to get my life right, I'm starting afresh, I want a relationship with the Lord, I want to be right morally, spiritually, I work really hard. Would we tell that person you need to stop working hard? So
Right.
it's just a category difference that we've allowed to be equivocated, I think, in an unhealthy way.
Yeah. And so how do you build that culture within your business with your 85 employees? Do you talk about it? Do you do anything that helps encourage hard work, but not sinning by ignoring your family, but also not sinning by not working hard?
Yes. So we talk about it every single day.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give the most cliche answer that is cliche for a reason. The number one thing I try to do as the leader of the business, the founder and managing partner, is I try to model it.
Yes.
And lead by example. I was on a Zoom earlier today with a business owner who had told me he hasn't been in the office since before COVID. And he's done Zooms with his people or whatnot, but he just simply is not a presence in the business. He's the founder, the leader, but he's just so checked out. And he was walking me through all of these significant challenges they're going through the business. And it was sort of be like what a doctor must feel like sometimes when someone goes, doctor, I don't know what's wrong. I feel so unhealthy. I eat ice cream all day and don't exercise. What's the problem? You're like, really? So this is not working well for you, huh?
Yeah. So he brought in a financial expert to help him diagnose the very difficult problem of why his business is. And I've known people who went off and did triathlons or things, and they're like, I try and work my 4-hour work week, and my business is struggling. It's like, oh, that's weird. I wonder why that is. So, but I also think what's important, what you said, is you model it, but you also talk about it every day. It is always, every business I talk to, if you want to enforce something, if you want to build a cultural thing, you just have to talk about it a lot, and not talk about it in a weird way or in a, punishing way to your employees, but like, this is who we are, this is what we are. And then if you're a hypocrite, that's not going to work, right? And so talk about it and do it. It's not that complicated, but it's surprising how many people struggle with that.
I think,
Next question.
Too, one thing I'll interject real quickly. I think you understand very well, and it's something I think is a valuable part of like what an organization like Red Balloon is capable of. A lot of this stuff has to be talked about at the hiring, not merely after hiring and when one is in the employ. But I think it behooves people to opt in or opt out. Yes. And when we say one of our cultural values is that this is not a job, it's a calling, I think most hiring processes now that are become so bureaucratic and HR'd, they really almost immediately become a negotiation about benefits. Yes. It's just the weirdest, most tedious, and almost irrelevant thing. Now, at some point, you're going to want to explain, here's the way the benefits work, and here's some of the, ins and outs of dental and this and that. But I mean, that's almost the heart of the matter for a lot of people's hiring now. Do you agree with the vacation days we're offering you in the health plan? If so, you may join our organization. Right. Well, what we're trying to say to people is this may be the right place for you and it may not. But very candidly, we really don't want to hire people that we don't think are going to be here forever. And we want to give them a place they can be forever, where their hopes and dreams can come true. And we take it very serious missionally. Here's our mission. Here's why we do what we do. Yep. That can allow certain people to self-select out. Now, a lot of people still want the job. We pay really well. We have really good benefits. They're still going to want to work with us, and they may not be fully bought in. You can't foolproof this. Right. But then on a go-forward basis, especially with 85 people versus 8, you're going to have certain tiers that are really bought in and other tiers that are less bought in. It's important for leadership to know who those people are, because I want to invest my resources into those who are fully bought in. If there's people that are less bought in, but they're doing their job, they're getting it done, but they're less bought in, they're not going to be terminated, but they're not in the same kind of thought process and ecosystem.
And they're not going to have the same leadership opportunities, probably.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And as you build that culture, obviously it's not just like it's a calling, it's what we're doing, but you still have a product you're selling to a customer, whether it's in investments or wealth management. And I guess, David, you're a smart person, despite your lack of college, my lack of college. I still think you are a mildly intelligent person. You could have done a lot of different things. You're a good writer, you're a good speaker. Why go into investments and investment analysis, and not investment analysis, but wealth management? Because sometimes, I'll be honest, the stock market feels kind of like a popularity contest at a middle school of who is, how can we get the crowd to buy this stock, therefore the value goes up, even though the fundamentals of the business aren't what they need to be. Why did you go into this field and feel called here?
Well, first, let's point out that you can't use popularity to make the value go up. You can only use popularity to make the price go up.
Correct.
Because value is more intrinsic. And I have been very passionate about economics since I was a very little kid. And in my opinion, those that do economics best are those who apply it. And all wealth management is applying the principles of economics in the context of being a solutions provider. So you have people that have various goals or objectives or needs. In other words, they're searching for solutions, and we can bless them with those solutions, and that's what wealth management is. And capital markets and investment markets, and it could be publicly traded companies, but it could be debt instruments, it could be real estate, it could be private businesses. There's a whole landscape of investment opportunities that are used as solutions or a means to an end in being a solutions provider. This whole concept that then also gets attached to estate planning, tax planning, business planning, succession planning, philanthropy, thinking intelligently about, how to leave money to one's kids, how to leave money to charity. All of these things, the accumulation, preservation, and transfer phase of wealth animate me. In other words, I'm called to it.
Yes.
So that's the reason I went down the path. Now, I didn't know when I got into it that it could be as lucrative of a field. I figured it paid pretty well. But the opportunity is there to do so well by doing good for others. It's a unique opportunity. And then it is one in which you, especially now as a full business owner, you really get to have that entrepreneurial element as well, building out, something that is unique to your own vision for the company. So that's the reason. It is a dream job for me, Andrew. It scratches all the itches I could imagine. And I would say that if it paid half the compensation it pays, if I were to go work for a hedge fund and was merely analyzing financial assets, I would love doing it, but it wouldn't be attached to the really human things, which to me is the essence of economics, human action. And if all I was a therapist, and I was giving people advice and trying to be a life coach for them, but I wasn't working inside capital markets, I don't think that would fill my cup either. I basically get to work with financial assets and human beings all at once. That synthesis is what's so special.
And you get paid for it, which is really cool. And I feel this at Red Balloon, right? When I get these thank you notes from perfect strangers about they just found a new job and their marriage is in better shape, or it saved their marriage, or it changed the trajectory of their family because their vocation is such a defining feature of their life, and we help them be free at work. I am still a capitalist. I like making money. I'm not opposed to making money, but that scratches all the itches for me. So I deeply resonate with that answer. As you're advising customers, obviously the capital markets right now, the interest rate, all of the factors that are driving behavior right now are incentivizing people to think a certain way about their money. Do you what do you think that is right now? How are all the forces from external incentivizing people to think about their money, and how do you advise, educate, bring people along to think about it differently?
Well, I think for one thing is it's almost never that we're talking about the stock market. We very consciously want to be focused on being minority owners of businesses. And our perspective day to day is not on how, to your point, how either people in extreme moments of euphoria may bid something up irrationally, or in
like eBay or something.
or extreme moments of fear can bid it down very quickly.
Yes.
On a day-to-day basis, there's virtually nothing that makes McDonald's as a company worth more or less than it was the day before, but its stock price goes up and down every day.
Right.
Now, that's a byproduct of the liquidity that people want so much from public equities, that with liquidity comes the ability for bad human action. But we try to remove ourselves from that. The way we think about any business, what are the products and services this business makes? What is its business model, its revenue model? And what is its path to grow that? Why would we want to be a minority owner of this business? And that is a very important philosophical issue for us. Primarily right now, there's a lot of bad habits investors have, but the leading one they have is believing that how good a company is and what you have to pay to buy it are irrelevant. That the second thing doesn't matter to the first thing. And so consequently, you get 5 to 8 companies that are incredibly successful, have a profound moat around their business, and have grown into the trees. In some cases, $3 trillion plus market capitalization, like unfathomable numbers. What single company is worth more than most countries on Earth?
Yes.
And people who believe, because of the prominence of some of those companies, that they will then accomplish the same thing in the next 10 years as the last 10, which is all but a mathematical impossibility. This is one of the great things about American, what you're calling capitalistic life, a free enterprise.
Yeah.
We do not have decades where our best 5 companies are the same the next 10 years, because our economy is too darn dynamic. There's too much competition. The Europeans often are stuck with some of the same companies that were predominant in 1975 or the same companies predominant in 2025. We don't really ever see that in our country because of the dynamism and innovation and competition that our free enterprise system cultivates. I think that's a wonderful testimony to our way of life.
And how do you, as you're blessing your customers, how do you help your team bring people along in that thinking and not just, I heard one guy, he said, I pick my stocks based on who has commercials on the Super Bowl. If they have a Super Bowl commercial, they're clearly doing great, and so I'm going to pick a stock based on that, which was maybe not the worst idea I've ever heard, but it was at least a top 10. But how do you help your team bless customers around that?
Pets.com, and I would encourage that person to look at the 1999 and 2000 commercials.
Oh, yes.
The leading sponsor 2 years ago was FTX, so, there's some both...
Worked out.
Recent history and an old history. Ecclesiastes says it, right? There's nothing new under the sun.
That's right. That's right.
We the way we do it is the way you're supposed to do most of these things, is by constant repetition of message.
Yeah.
We never stop, whether it's from podcast, video, written commentary, personal conversation, daily, weekly. We are relentless content creators, but not content creators in the way people talk about being an influencer on TikTok, but we're trying to put meat on the bone of a philosophy. And so we have clients that are with us because they want to hear that. And any client who didn't want to hear it probably wouldn't want to be a client of ours.
Right.
So then in that burden of thought leadership and idea generation, we're trying to create content that is constantly reminding people of first principles, of up-to-date thinking, of applied economics. This just becomes a substantial part of our value proposition to clients. And then it has the dual benefit of also being a magnet for new clients.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although I think that if you were doing TikTok dances while talking about economics, I know I would pay money for that. It would entertain me no end.
I would say that it would be a short-term boom to business.
It would be. It would be. I think you might lose some customers in the long run. Quick switch. Do you do internships at the Bahnsen Group? And if so, how do you think about internships? Is that part of developing talent? Is it pure philanthropy? When you're thinking about the long term, is that part of your strategy for building a culture at the company?
That's a great question. I would certainly say that we had some interns that I ended up deciding it was pure philanthropy.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, we believe it's a constructive way to develop talent, to kind of get a little sneak peek as to if someone could have a future, and then for them to play a significant role. You know, it's funny, we just had a going away party for an intern that we haven't done it this way before. She came at the end of summer and stayed all the way through the end of the school year after graduating from high school, and now is going to Notre Dame in the fall, but her parents wanted to do a gap year, and she came to New York City. It was in a church in New York, a community in New York, and came to work for us for a year. And that was somebody that if I could talk her out of going to Notre Dame, I'd hire her tomorrow at a senior level. I mean, really one of the great people we've ever brought in, just very talented, very hardworking. But most of the interns have been summer internships. But now with 10 offices, we're in a position to do more of it. And we have done it a number of ways. We've hired an intern that was devoted to one department. You're coming to intern for our investment solutions department, or you're going to intern for our operations department. And then we've interned them where they were cross-pollinated across tax, planning, operations, investment. You know, we have multiple departments. And so we're still trying different things, Andrew. But it's not philanthropy. No, we want it to be a benefit to the company, and then provide an opportunity to develop these young people. Generally, they're college students, or at least college age. And so far, we've had more good experiences than bad ones. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. Because I think there's a lot of businesses kind of grappling, like, is that part of our strategy? Does it need to be part of our strategy? And it really is mixed results. I think if you're moving someone to a location and then they're planning on leaving, you almost have built in, you're going to get a small amount of value, but hopefully build some employment branding with that person. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that you're going to have a long-term person. Whereas if you can find someone who's maybe already in the town of an office, I think there's a higher probability of a long-term asset to the company with that employee. David, I want to make sure I'm conscious of your time. As businesses are kind of grappling with, man, I want to start a business. I want to go out and succeed. I want to do it in such a way that I don't lose my moral fabric while going out and just making money. And there are temptations in every area of life, whether you're a W-2 employee or you start your own business, to go against your belief system. Any words of advice for a business owner who says, you know what, I want to be distinctly Christian in the way that I run my business, but I want to do it in a way that's not weird? What words of advice would you give them?
You know, it's funny. I have had a chance to reflect on this a lot, and more recently, there's always the things of what does it mean to be distinctly Christian. Like I want to have integrity, and I guess if there's someone out there that would say, like, hey, I was going to start a business, I was planning on lying all the time, but because I'm a Christian, I'm not going to lie, then, you know, that's a good thing. Don't lie, but it's not particularly special. Like, I wouldn't lead with that with investors or customers. Like, we're a great business. We were going to lie all the time, and we decided not to.
And we were going to make a ton of money lying, but, you know, it's like, actually, that's not how the world works. But go ahead.
I think that integrity is table stakes, and there's a lot of things that Christians hold out as unique parts of what they're doing that are really just the baseline.
Yes.
You do not become a good husband by not cheating on your wife, but if you cheat on your wife, you are a bad husband, right?
Right.
But it takes more than that, I've been told. So I think that one of the things in the current moment I will say to people is, whether you're W-2 or running your own business, starting something, of all the different elements that matter, answering the question why, having the right character system, but not whatnot. The biggest issue I see right now is self-pity. I believe that Christians have got to stop feeling sorry for themselves.
Yes.
And accept that what they're talking about that they have to overcome is not that big of a deal. People have had to overcome far worse. And if you can't overcome this obstacle here, or this unfair thing there, or this HR policy there, then you really are not going to be able to overcome the actual competitive challenges of running a business. Running a business is a contact sport. And I do believe over the last several years in some of the cultural epidemics we've struggled with, that an ingrained victimhood has come about that I find very problematic, and we have to overcome it if we're going to succeed as entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Oh, I think that is, and Christians are sometimes the worst. They, they see, and we've talked about this. They're like, oh, well, I got canceled from my bank because I'm a Christian. Like, no, you get canceled from your bank because you're overdrafted and you don't care about details. That's actually what's driving it. It has nothing to do with your ability to read your Bible. David, I want to let you go, and I'll ask you one more question. I was actually at Hillsdale College a month or so ago speaking, and it was a bunch of retired people, I'll be honest, talking about economics and the labor market. And one guy got up and said, why doesn't this younger generation work? And I thought, well, I think the best way to keep everybody awake in a room is to offend everyone. So I said, well, we have led the way. If the whole point of your job is to earn enough money to retire so that you can stop working, I think the next generation learned that lesson so well they didn't even want to start. Would you agree with that sentiment? I know that's maybe a aggrandizing question, but do you think that that's part of why we have the 3.5 million working age men who don't even want to participate in the labor market?
I think that it's part of the reason we have a millennial, Gen Y, and then a Gen Z generation that has the attitude towards work that a lot of them have had. The 3.1 million men might even be a different situation with a different cultural and moral apparatus, but what you're getting at is something I have a whole chapter about in my book. I think the boomers taught the younger generation that the purpose of work was to not do it anymore. That's right. Now the boomers and Gen X are sitting around flabbergasted that the millennials dared to believe them.
Right. Right.
And all the millennials have done has basically been more consistent than the boomers were. Yeah. Fundamentally, I appreciate that the baby boomers worked very hard and that they produced a lot of goods and services.
Yes.
But if they did so with this mentality of what's my number, I'm circling a day on the calendar that I can check out and then get to the golf course for the rest of my life, what you've done is downstream provide a message that is going to lead to a very low view of work, a low view of blessing the people you work with, a low view of excellence, and that becomes very hard to come back from. Yeah. And that is, I think, a huge issue we're having to undo generationally. We cannot continue to teach that the purpose of work is to not have to do it anymore.
Yep, I love that. David, any final words of wisdom, either for small business owners who are trying to figure out what to do with themselves when they grow up, or job seekers who are either trying to succeed where they are or go find something else to do? Any final words of wisdom for them?
To the latter, all job seekers, remember you yourself are a business as well. You're just selling the business of your labor. So the tax treatment of what you're doing is immaterial. You fundamentally have agency because you're a human being made in the image of God who has freedom. Don't take that for granted. Be grateful for the market economy we have in America, but recognize whether you're an employee or employer, you have certain freedoms, and what you choose to do with them is your decision, but use them and do them productively and creatively.
Amazing. I love that. I would encourage everyone, you need to go get David Bahnsen's books. You need to listen to his podcast. You need to invest money with him, and you need to be best friends with him because he is smarter than you are, even though he didn't go to college. I am Andrew Krabachetz. This is The Pipeline. I hope you have a great day.